This is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.
Welcome to the second session. First of all, I would like to introduce you dear Assistant Professor Oya Gümüşkaya-Bradley, who is our second session keynote speaker. She has many years of clinical and academic experience in the field of nursing. She first obtained nursing registration in Turkey 2003 and became a registered nurse in Australia 2016. Having gained experience in the operating room and intensive care of cardiovascular surgery, she has attained a large scale of nursing skills, both technical and non-technical, throughout her career. The operating room provides an environment where her passion for perioperative nursing could be nurtured, which drove her to research and postgraduate students. Her career eventually distinguished in education when she was employed as a research assistant in 2007. She completed a master's and a PhD degree in surgical nursing while developing her career from the clinical experience to research and education. She works as a lecturer at the University of Newcastle School of Nursing and Midwifery Australia and participating in international collaboration in research and nursing organizations. Now I invite dear Assistant Professor Oya Gümüşkaya-Bradley to talk about nursing education in COVID-19 attitudes of nurses. Now I am calling upon to speak.
Thank you, Iram, for your beautiful introduction, and hello everyone. I hope the conference is going smooth and beneficial for you all. I would like to first thank the organization committee and my friend Demet for inviting me to be with you all today. I hope what I'm going to share is going to help you in one way or another and maybe show some a different new perspective and also reflect, help us reflect on what has been happening and how can we improve from here and how can we learn from this. As Iram beautifully introduced, thank you again. I am working as an academician in the University of Newcastle. It's been over a year, but before that I had extensive experience in Turkish universities, Yeditepe University and Istanbul University for several years. So the reason I'm mentioning this, that I had the chance to compare my experience before and after COVID. Now the new language is that before COVID and after COVID. So if we are going to talk about nursing education and what happened and how we adapted and coped with the constant daily challenges, I need to introduce you a little bit Australia, if that's the correct term, and also the education in Australia, and especially nursing education in Australia, because it is compared to Turkey and so many European countries, as far as my knowledge goes, that it is quite different in many ways. So the first, of course, and the most important comparison and difference is that nurses have a lot more autonomy in Australia, and they have established as organizations that they can be backed up and supported and also regulated, and this creates standards, and I will mention each one of them to you. Also, in regards to COVID, that we need to remember that it is actually an island, a continent. So we were sort of really lucky during the pandemic. And what came with it, it was easier to close borders and control the human traffic, and therefore COVID was more under control again compared to the rest of the world. So we did have our struggles, of course, and in education and in life as well, but there were periods that we were sort of back to somewhat normal, and then there were periods that we were under lockdowns or heavy regulations. Australia also has 8 territories or states, and also the traffic between those were controlled and stopped in the peak times of COVID infection spreading. So that was also another chance that it was easier to control. But there was a maybe disadvantage in all times about having states, that they were also somewhat independent in law and in management and in education. But nowadays it's more like a national sense. Everything is managed nationally, and the rules in nursing education is regulated nationally. As I mentioned before, so there are some big establishments that we continuously being supported as academicians and nurses, and also regulated by. So everything we did to adapt the pandemic and the changes came after it was reported to these establishments and was limited by them as well. We weren't completely free to do anything we wanted as a school or as a university. There were limitations that what can be done and what cannot be done. For example, and most importantly, I'm proud to say that they did not compromise on clinical hours. So if we did manage, as I said, we were a bit luckier to the rest compared to the rest of the world, we did manage and caught up once the regulations were a bit eased. We caught up with clinical hours. But if our students didn't catch up, they were not be able to. They weren't going to be able to graduate, or even if they did graduate, they wouldn't be able to have their registrations, therefore wouldn't be able to practice. So ANMAC, in short, Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council, is the biggest one as an academics and nursing students for us. This establishment defines the standards for nursing education. So how many hours, what kind of content, and how updated this content, who is teaching this content, what kind of physical atmosphere this content is being taught. And everything about the nursing education, basically, ANMAC defines the standards and then checks the education providers against those standards and either gives you accreditation or not. And if you as a school don't have accreditation, again, your graduates cannot practice nursing. So it's an immense amount of pressure on universities, luckily, like we are very happy about that. And same as for nursing schools. So every little change I did on my course, every lecture I pulled from the physical environment and put online, every exam I turned into online that I had to justify and also report to ANMAC. Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, APRA, is a big, again, another organization, works under government, and they define who can practice in all health health practitioners, including medicine, including physiotherapy, including psychology. So under that, there's our board, Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia, and our board defines who, excuse the spelling, who can practice nursing in Australia and what level. So we have several levels. AIN's assistants in nursing, they have more like a 2-year school. It's not undergraduate, it's like tertiary higher education, but it's not bachelor level, it's not a university degree, another way of saying. But an MBA have also defines the standards and includes this includes the education as well. So who can practice in what level? If you just having a bachelor degree does not mean you can practice as a registered nurse. So after graduation, our students or international nurses like myself coming to Australia goes to this establishment and provide their background, education and experience and all documentations. And then they assess these and then either give you your registration as a nurse or not. And the other bigger, again, organization that we are liable to report to is the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency, TEQSA in short. Again, TEQSA defines what university education is and what level what kind of skills can be gained in each level. Therefore, all universities and all degrees have to adjust to TEQSA standards, quality standards. ANMAC writes the legislation, and as the schools we apply these legislations, and then ANMAC checks us, and then NMBA checks the end result for registration. So we sort of, this is all responding to each other. If we don't comply with ANMAC standards, the Accreditation Council standards, we cannot give our graduates the chance to practice, as they cannot be registered. Again, the same goes for the universities. If they're not TEQSA qualified, their graduates cannot be practicing in Australia. So this, of course, as a TEQSA is more general sense of higher education establishment, and whereas ANMAC is focused on nursing, there are sometimes conflict between those two. My colleagues in Turkey would know this, between YÖK and the nursing organizations or education academicians, that sometimes TEQSA defines a standard that is conflicting with NMAC standards within the hours or the content of the whole degree, and then there needs to be some adjustments in the university level to comply and resolve these. For example, what kind of selective subjects they will take before they graduate. NMAC regulated degrees in nursing are not just registered nurses, as I mentioned before, not just bachelor degree. There's a level in nursing that in Australia is valid, is the nurse practitioner. This is a postgraduate degree, and they have a scope of skills that they're more specified in a certain area, and they can prescribe some certain medications and refer patients to more specialized care or some diagnostic tests. Nurse practitioners were more independent compared to registered nurse. So this is also regulated by NMAC. So as the entry to practice courses such as international nurses or nurses that didn't practice for a while and wants to go back to the practice. The school provides eligibility for registration basically to students, and then APRA checks this, controls, assesses this, and then allows health professionals to practice basically. So this is very important. I would like to again underline this. As we are all registered nurses in Australia, academicians and the university nursing school workers, because we have to keep our own registration, we are liable to those standards I will show in a minute in the next slides, that to be able to keep our own registration and ability to practice, we cannot compromise any of these standards. So we cannot create documents that is not reflecting the education. We cannot lie, in a simple way of saying, in anything we do. So that creates another level of integrity, as we are ourselves health practitioners and would like to stay that way. When we look at the APRA, more importantly, Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia standards, that you can see we have the 7 main standards on the screen here. Each one of them is, of course, detailed and explained, and how to provide evidence regarding these is also defined. But as you can see, that you need to be able to conduct assessment, develop a plan of nursing care, and provide safe and appropriate and quality nursing practice. So anything can be under standard 6, for example, for a safe and quality care. I'm not going to go into so much in details of how why these establishments are there and what their roles are. I think what I've been telling about these establishments sort of also reflecting that as well. So I'm going to skip those NMAC sort of slides and jump into their standards, and also how did we adapt with COVID-19 under all these regulations and rules. Again, regardless of COVID, anything we do on our website or any changes in the number of professionals or academicians in the school, the ratio between those academicians and professional staff to student, it all needs to be continuously reported to NMAC. And it's not like once you are accredited as a school, you are fine. No, every year there is continuous assessments done. Relevant discipline experts are required to be working in these schools. So that's another, again, level of integrity, as I mentioned before, that like, unfortunately, some other countries, like a medical professional, for example, cannot work in a nursing school. That also creates another level of integrity. So to have a little breather, this is the famous Opera House in Sydney, and an Aboriginal art is reflected with lights on it, which I really like, one of the famous Sydney pictures. As I mentioned before, NMAC has these standards, 5 standards that we have to measure up to during, before or after COVID. Safety of the public, governance, program of study, student experience, and student assessments are the headings for these standards. So when we talk about safety of the public, that brings in the sense of nursing education, the ethics, standards, national priorities, language and communication efficiency, evidence-based teaching material and practice, of course, so on. When we talk about the governance, it's the level of education. Is it really a bachelor level of education? And then when we talk about the program of study, this is more like learning outcomes and contemporary nursing, and the aim for contemporary nursing and the assessment of these. When we talk about the student experience, they look at program transparency, what kind of academic support students receive being provided, what kind of a program advisory or decision-making committees are provided to students. And when we look at the assessments, so if the assessment items are reflecting on the learning outcomes, and are these learning outcomes mapped to the NMBA standards, all these are continuously controlled. So this is our school's website, and these are our committees. If anyone is curious, I'm happy to share my slides as well. I have the permission of the school. And I'm going to skip many of the details. I'm conscious of the time. So if, as I mentioned before, a program is not accredited, our graduates cannot register. So if we didn't comply during the COVID changes with the ANMAC and APRA requirements, we wouldn't be able to graduate nurses anyway. So we had to make sure that we provided those. This is a reflection of the changes. So our students also had to adapt to COVID-19 changes like we did a lot. So a lot of learning became, the new terminology for it is the flipped learning. So they had to do a lot of prep work before they actually came into the online environment, because it's the same for a physical environment at the moment, but more so on the online or virtual version of this education, they had to really be more prepared, and a lot of work were done by themselves at home, and that made things really difficult for us all. So what did we actually do in practice? So as you all aware, and you all experienced, of course, everything was all of a sudden on all the theoretical content, of course, not practical content. We still did our labs, we still went to clinical placements, but everything theoretical was going to be delivered in a classroom environment, was put on either Zoom or Collaborate or any kind of virtual tool to help us meet with the students. But this wasn't enough, because then our students are a big majority of them, I should say, were working, and some of them were working as AINs. So they were already in practicing, and therefore their availability and working hours also were a lot fluctuating and changing constantly. So they could not be in the live delivery of these online activities, but they had to be able to access these later on. So we had to record majority of our content. And that brought another level of ethical issues, that who can be recorded, are the individuals in the lecture are allowing you to record what kind of content, sometimes technical difficulties, people forgetting their microphones on. I had, for example, a student giving her full address while I was recording because she forgot her microphone on, she was on the phone. So things like that we didn't anticipate, and we couldn't use that recording. But also we had to make all these recordings available to our students. But then there was this, so it's easy to say, oh yes, I will watch that lecture or tutorial later. But then that's a 3 hours or 2 hours tutorial or lecture, then that life goes on and they actually don't watch it or do not participate or engage enough. And then they miss out on the course requirements and the learning outcomes as well. So there were issues with that. Making it constantly available and accessible. We did, but that actually, in contrast, decreased the student engagement. The biggest problem we had, and still making me anxious when I even talk about it, were the online assessments. So we had to, of course, do the assessments online to graduate our students on time. And that was a massive challenge. So we had to create completely new assignments that could be conducted in a virtual environment, and also still have the quality of the assessment and also provide academic integrity. So in other words, that we were trying to stop our students or not make it so convenient for them to sort of use the sources that they shouldn't use, and also at the same time provide a good measuring tool that would reflect their learning, because it's also difficult for them to be on a computer instead of a pen and paper, and they were also worried about the technical difficulties. Not all of them had the resources to have a good network or a device to connect, and these created another thing to layer again, that we couldn't have just a 2 hours exam. We had to open the exam for longer hours. Then again, to provide the academic integrity, we decided to give them more like an assignment, like half assessment, half assignment sort of task, and ask them to reference and write open-end, ask open-end questions and ask them to write a paragraph and reference that. But things like we didn't think about or we experienced and learned. For example, we created this 24-hour assessment. So it was open for 24 hours in a day, and therefore any student could, regardless of their other responsibilities, they could take the exam in their own time. And the exam was supposed to take sort of 3 to 4 hours, but that again had a lot of backlash. So again, not each student could sit down for the day or even 3 to 4 hours, and they had other responsibilities, or they didn't have the network for 3 to 4 hours, or similarly they couldn't access the resources and things like that. So that was the biggest backlash we had. I think no one was happy about that kind of assessments, and we created new sort of more assignment kind of assessment items. Some schools I would like to mention here that come up with strategies such as having a mirror, so a student shows the room while in the exam, and also their ID, so they prove that no one else is in the room and they're not in somewhere else or with other students during the exam. I'm laughing at this because there's no way of stopping if the student is not committed to the assessment. So, but every school, I guess, tried to provide their students integrity. And the quality was, again, the level of the questions itself and the level of learning they aim in these questions. Maybe some of you are familiar to Bloom's taxonomy and the levels of these in the domains, in the 3 domains of Bloom taxonomy. So when we aim for more like a process of information sort of questions, that it makes it very difficult to create a question that is multiple choice or a one-word answer sort of in an exam, in a virtual online exam. We were required to provide a lot more contact hours with students. So that was personally for me one of the biggest challenges, because when you walk into a classroom or talk to students, that is a more open communication. So everyone in that room, in that environment, hears that, and that maybe creates more questions, and it's all discussed. Whereas in lectures and tutorials, students sort of kept to themselves, and they preferred emailing their questions or wanting to call us. And when you have a course of 600, 700 students, that was another massive challenge for us, because the same question was answered maybe 20, 50 times in a day, because the students would not write on a discussion forum on Blackboard, or wouldn't ask the question in the online environment, whereas they feel comfortable to ask in a tutorial or lecture in a physical classroom. So that was, and also universities asked us to be more available and respond, because the students were at home and they left, they felt they were left so unsupported and alone. So we were asked to provide more support, whereas it was very difficult to keep up, because again, in Australia, our nursing cohort is a lot bigger compared to Turkey. I don't know other countries, but I know my friend Memnun in America have sort of smaller cohorts as well. So one course has, as I mentioned, in all universities, in nursing schools in Australia, approximately 500 to 1,000 students. So that was really difficult to manage and maintain. The other thing that university provided were the resources, and that was the most important part, I think. These resources were financial resources. If they were impacted by COVID, there were sort of several funding opportunities for the affected people. There were free, constant psychological support. This could be just another peer to talk to, or free counseling, online or physical, that was provided, and academic learning. And IT support. It was really challenging time for us all, because the staff was the same number of staff. Maybe we employed more sessionals during that time, but there were a lot more to do. So we all sort of adapted to those, and our students benefited those things. And other supports that we as a school and the university have provided is that they didn't have to provide, for example, any sort of legal documentation. All they needed to do was to provide a statement, a sentence that is signed or emailed by a student that they are impacted by COVID-19. And that was making them eligible for any sort of application for adverse circumstances. We call it extension for assignments, or another chance for a second attempt. So these were also the support that we tried to provide our students. Most of you probably used one of these learning technologies, learning management systems. They are called LMS. And we used as the Blackboard as the university, and now changing to Canvas. But there are, I know, others, but they sort of all use the same, either Zoom or Collaborate systems to adapt. But of course, with the pandemic and after, the content here became survival, became really important. So this became our Bible for Christians, if I don't offend anyone. This was, we had to be very careful what kind of information we put there, and what we didn't put there created 600 emails, as I mentioned before, or something that we weren't clear enough, again, created a huge confusion. Or we had to really organize so well each of the course content and the assessments, and we have to provide extra information in videos and other all visual tools that we could get our hands on for each of these items as well. So I think Blackboard also had all these LMSs had their busiest time during this. The other things that I have to mention with student support is that they could withdraw from any courses that without penalty. So if they didn't want to go to clinical placement, for example, that they didn't feel comfortable going into hospital, they could withdraw from the course without penalty. And even theoretical courses, we didn't sort of, the university and our school were a lot more lenient during the process to support our students. And also we always hold school executives and each course coordinators and even the tutors provided weekly drop-ins on virtually online sessions that anyone could jump in, contact and communicate on a like this virtual environment face to face and ask their questions. And Student Central employed more students to help other students as well, and there was a lot of they were sort of advocates for students. So if there was a conflict between the tutors or course coordinators, this center would jump in and help student and advocate for students as well. And I got in trouble with them a couple of times, of course. Daily discussions and forum responses on again, Blackboard were provided. So it was really busy times that we had to check those discussion forums and respond to those questions daily. And again, the university asked us to not to delay any email responses more than 48 hours. So any questions were responded within 2 days. There were extra trainings for us that the university provided to create more engaging courses. So we also went through sort of quick trainings for Zoom or Collaborate, or how to do online surveys, or how to create more engaging course content in a video. And most of the time, the biggest challenge was that speaking to a camera and being in a room and pretend that you are there like just right now. But I got used to it. And also our students had these tools to learn and had these support if they wanted to learn more about how to submit a narrated PowerPoint presentation, for example. This is a picture from one of our campuses in the library. That brings us towards the end of my presentation as well, the clinical placements and what did we do about the clinical placements. So if the student was comfortable to go into the clinical placement, the same rule for the health professional applied to the students. So, but were there any limitations from the health establishments or hospitals? Yes, of course there were. Some cut half by half the number of students they normally accept. So if we were able to send 10, we could only send 5. Some clinics or wards or high-risk areas, for example, the organ translation areas or heavy sort of surgical wards with immunocompromised patients, they didn't accept any students at all. Or the facilitators who goes to these places and assess or support our students, their contact hours to the students were limited as well. And the whole PPE rules, of course, were applied to our students as well. To be able to cope with that, because the placements were limited, but NMAC said, no, you have to give them 800 hours, where some wards didn't even accept students. So we had this backing up with student numbers that didn't complete their clinical hours to manage that, we expanded the areas that we send our students. So there were students that had to travel 7 hours north or 5 hours north to be able to find, if we were to find a clinical placement for them. Then we had to support our students, provide them free accommodation and support them with their travel as well, so they could complete their placement in those places, which was amazing actually. But again, in Australia, we are very lucky. Our average income is a lot higher than many of the countries. So please, when you compare these things in your own country, remember that Australia has more money, simply put. So we did pull some of these clinical placement or clinical education, or now as we call it professional experience, into anything we could do online, we did online. So all the assessments that were done in the hospitals, they became online interviews. So they did go to clinical place, they did their hours, and then come back and had to do extra hours for their assessment items. And of course, the facilitators had to sort of be more open and flexible in their hours to support students as well. I think this is going to bring me to the end of my presentation. This is my contact details if you want to learn more about the adjustments we did or how things work in Australia. I'm happy to answer your questions. And also, that is my profile information if you wanted to contact me in the future. I am going to look at the moderators and ask for their help and stop sharing my screen as well. And I think I'm gonna maybe read questions. You're muted, Demet.
Sorry. What do you do to ensure the active participation of students in online classes? The question asked.
Thank you.
For you.
Thank you. Very good question. There were several strategies that the education department provided us kindly. One of these were using shorter lectures, having shorter lectures. So the lectures were limited to, the recommendation was to 8 to 10 minutes. And when that wasn't possible, sort of concept focused lectures. So instead of starting from the gastrointestinal diseases in surgical nursing, we had to focus on just gastrectomy and give that lecture and record another one. So the student can have this sort of small candy size information. Another recommendation was to create games or little engagement activities, also instigate curiosity. So show students that what they don't know yet, and again show them what they could learn in that environment. And another recommendation was not to draw students into too many activities, and create sort of clean stages for them to progress in the course. These are the first ones that came to my mind.
Thank you for your contribution. And the second session will begin soon. Thank you, Oya.
You're very welcome, Demet. It was a pleasure. I hope it was good. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you to dear Assistant Professor Oya Gümüşkaya-Bradley for your contribution. Now I invite dear Diego Andrade joining us from Hungary, talking about the impact of virtual online teaching due to the Covid-19 pandemic on academic burnout. Now I'm calling upon you to speak.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. I will share my screen now. I hope you are seeing my screen. So, my name is Diego Andrade. I'm from Brazil. I'm graduate in nurse and midwifery. I did my master in Brazil, and now I'm doing my PhD in health science at University of Pécs in Hungary. And I will talk today about the impact of virtual online teaching due to the Covid-19 pandemic on the academic burnout. This is a work that was constructed by me, Ícaro Ribeiro, my colleague in Brazil, and my supervisor, Matheus Cholia. So the content of my presentation will be background, objective, method, result and discussion, conclusions, and references. So, bring about the background. As you know, when you are experiencing the COVID pandemic confined most everyone at home. And it won't be different with the students. So the students is confined at home as well. So one of the solutions for that was the virtual online teaching by a lot of platforms. And it's a really good solution to avoid the spread of the virus inside the room, the physical room, inside the university. And as you know, the university itself changed a lot of the lifestyle of the students. Most of the time for better, but sometimes can appear like a mental health conditions and mental health problems. And one of them is the academic burnout. The burnout is a syndrome and can be characterized by 3 dimensions that I brought here. The specialization is one of them, that when the students start to with cynicism, like start to have a negative attitude toward the colleagues, the teachers. And other dimension is the emotional exhaustion, that when the students is drain the energy, really overwhelmed. And the other one is the reduced personal accomplishment. It's when the students don't have few more that can reach his or her success. So this syndrome is characterized by these 3 dimensions. The objective of this study was to analyze the impact of virtual online teaching due to the COVID-19 pandemic on the university students' burnout. And for that, we made for these studies a systematic study. When we reach in the PubMed, Web of Science, and Scopes database for that, we research on this database. And in the beginning, we found 41 articles deterministically in these 41 articles. And after we removed duplicates, checked the title on the abstract, and reviewed full text, 7 studies eventually met the predetermined inclusion and exclusion criteria. So we used these 7 studies for this study, this article. I brought here some results and discussion. All of the articles were published between 2020 and 2021, because when started the COVID pandemic, 3 research were conducted in Spain, and the others in USA, Switzerland, China, and Cyprus. 4 studies were with medical students, and the others with nurse, pharmacy, and general university students. For measure the burnout was used the Maslach burnout inventory, Copenhagen burnout inventory, emotional exhaustion scale, and the Oldenburg burnout inventory as well. It's really interesting that most of the articles brought the increase of burnout and other mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety symptoms. So that here we already know, and you can see that the virtual online teaching is bringing some mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, and can be worse like as a burnout. Harris as well wrote in his article that the increase in anxiety and burnout at the same time that the students felt supported by the universities. So even when the students felt supported by the university, the anxiety increased and the burnout as well. And this is a weird thing to think that even supported by the university, there is an increase of anxiety and burnout. Emotional exhaustion and burnout was cited as an adverse effect on mental health of medical and nursing students, especially in the last year, due to the uncertainty of the qualification experience. This is really interesting because I think most of that is uncertainty of the qualification and the lack of experience to come out and start to work in a pandemic, in a COVID pandemic, is something that make the students already emotionally exhausted by that. So this is also other words that you have found in your research. A decreased academic performance was noted in the study about problematic social media usage and psychological capital on anxiety that were moderated with academic burnout. It's really interesting because during the COVID pandemic, we are confined at home. We usually use more the social media, but to be updated from our studies, from the university, from our colleagues, friends, and about the life outside of the confinement. So we use more the social media, and this author wrote that more social media usage, more anxiety the students have, and also more academic burnout. So, as a conclusion, I wrote that confinement itself can influence the students' academic performance, that it can generate feelings of exhaustion, negative self-criticism, and loss of interest. That's one of the three dimensions of burnout, and can triggering significant risk to the mental health of university students. The virtual online teaching is a solution, of course, for this current situation, as I told in the background, but must take in account all the complexity of the students in this pandemic moment. That is a challenge for the university, challenge for the teachers, and a challenge for the students as well. It was really interesting the speaker before that Professor brought these challenges that we have as a teacher, as students, as an institution, as a university, that have a lot of challenge, and we need to take account of all of this complexity that we are experiencing, we are living in this pandemic moment. So the adoption of appropriate strategies and digital tools is extremely important, and especially the trainee how to use this platform, and all of the support should be bring to avoid this burnout in the students and also the teaching staff, of course. One of these strategies, psychological support, can extracurricular activities like motivational activities, or for example that we have had during the morning about the laugh therapy, for that the professor Gisem, I think her name, Gisem, I think her name, and it was really interesting. And it's very important to have this improvement of the quality of the life of the students, because you are living and experience challenges as a student, as a teachers, and as an institution as well. So these appropriate strategies should be talked to with the students. Need to be this communication between the university and the students, the teacher and the students, how to deal with all of this complexity, if it's going on, it's good or not, and everything needs to be communicated to be better and supportive from the university and from the teacher, and this can avoid, of course, the burnout, not only on the students but in the teacher as well. So here some reference that I brought on the, and here my email as well, my contact. If you have any question, you can contact me, and thank you for listening.
We expect the attendees who want to ask questions or make contributions to write us from the YouTube chat section. Thank you to dear Diego Andrade for your contribution. Now I invite dear Tanya Kishore Kumar, joining us from Malaysia, to talk about adapting to COVID-19 pandemic of psychological impacts among nursing students. Now I am calling upon you to speak.
Thank you. Is it visible? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, can it be seen?
Yes.
All right.
Please start.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Kishore, and I'm from KPJ Healthcare University College from Malaysia. The topic of my presentation is Adapting to COVID-19 Pandemic, a critical literature review of the psychological impact among nursing students. Now, before I start my presentation, I would just like to highlight a few things about my country. The section that you see in yellow is Malaysia. Up north, you can see Vietnam and Philippines. Up top here, this is the border that we share with Thailand. Below us is Singapore. On the west side, we have Indonesia.
Sorry.
This is one...
You need to click the full screen button.
Is it not showing?
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Now. Try again, please.
Okay. Now? Okay, let me just,
yes.
Was it visible? Can it be seen?
No.
Okay, let me just,
click the full screen.
Yeah, let me just stop sharing and I'll share it again.
Okay.
Can it be seen now?
Click the full screen, please.
It's still not showing. Now?
No.
Just give me a few moments. Okay, how about now?
Yes, restart.
Yes? Restart it? Okay, no problem. All right, once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Kishore, and I'm from KPJ Healthcare University College from Malaysia. The topic of my presentation is Adapting to COVID-19 Pandemic, a critical literature review of the psychological impact among nursing students. Now, before I start my presentation, I would just like to highlight a few things about my country. The pictures that you see in yellow, the parts in yellow are Malaysia. Up north, you can see Vietnam, Philippines. We share a border with Thailand, and Singapore is right below here. This is one of our iconic structures in Malaysia. It's the Twin Towers, also known as KLCC. If you're into amusement parks, Genting Highlands is one of the best places to visit. This is Langkawi, so if you're into beaches, any water sports, or duty-free shopping, this is definitely one of the best places to go. Next, if you're into jungle trekking, hiking, especially in Sabah, you will find this national flower. It's called the Rafflesia. As I said before, since we're a tropical country, so if you're into a lot of beaches, we have a lot of them here. We have historical states such as Malacca. And last but definitely not the least, since we're a multiracial and a diverse country, we have any and every cuisine that you can think of. Next, I'll talk about my university. On the left side here is my campus. It's located in Nilai, Negeri Sembilan, Malaysia. We also have a campus in Johor as well as Penang. Our parent company is KPJ Healthcare Berhad Group, which is the biggest healthcare company in Asia. And we have 29 hospitals in Malaysia itself, as well as other business establishments and hospitals in Bangkok, Dhaka, otherwise known as Bangladesh, and Indonesia. Next, this is an overview of my presentation. Let me start with the introduction. All right, so as we all know, the coronavirus was first identified in Wuhan City, China in the year 2019. The International Committee of Taxonomy and Viruses, also known as ICTV, named this virus as SARS-CoV-2 on the 11th of February, year 2020. The World Health Organization Director, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, declared the coronavirus pandemic on the 12th of March in the year 2020. Next, we move on to research background. According to UNESCO, governments worldwide temporarily shut down educational institutions from preschool right up till tertiary educations. According to Fitzgerald and Conrad, student placements, simulations, and skill lab programs were cancelled or altered. This has caused the universities to have had to implement novel strategies and introduce multiple digital tools in order to accommodate these changes. Next, I'm going to talk about the measures taken by my university during the pandemic. First, in terms of theory, we migrated 100% to online teaching and learning as well as assessment. Platforms such as Google Meet, Zoom, Telegram, WhatsApp, etc. were used as a means of communication and for assignment submissions. ITEL, otherwise known as Interactive Teaching and Learning, is a learning management system, otherwise known as LMS, where the lecturers will be able to upload our module notes, and all our examinations were conducted via this system. In terms of skills, video-based skill training, the use of Google Conference, and a live demonstration skill lab are some of the measures taken by my university. Next, the need for more evidence. Nursing education, as we all know, is a unique integration of learning with practical application. The loss of contact with patients obviously will have an impact on the confidence and competence of nursing students. This uncertainty of whether we are able to obtain enough clinical knowledge and competency to graduate would definitely increase the anxiety and stress levels amongst nursing students. We empathize with how nerve-wracking the unpredictable nature of the world is and decided to evaluate how our fellow peers in this field have felt during the pandemic. Therefore, we chose to do a critical literature research into effects of COVID-19 and the psychological impact of nursing students across the globe. The aim of this review is to evaluate the psychological impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on nursing students. Next, we move on to methodology. There are 5 stages in this literature review. The first is identification, we move on to screening, the third is eligibility, then quality appraisal, and lastly, data extraction. Now, let me break down each step for you. The first step, identification, is where records were retrieved using multiple electronic databases, such as ProQuest, EBSCOhost, Medline, Google Scholar, PubMed, and National Center for Biotechnology Information, otherwise known as NCBI. The second step is screening, where search terms included psychological impacts, mental health, COVID-19, pandemic, and nursing students, through which 104 articles were initially found. The third step is eligibility. The inclusion criteria consisted of pre-licensure nursing students, mental health as the key issue, during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, journal article, and research manuscript. Exclusion criteria included non-empirical and non-English articles. The fourth step is quality appraisal. After screening using the above-mentioned inclusion criteria, 23 articles were found to be relevant to be used in this review. The last step is data extraction, whereby we found 5 main themes, namely depression, anxiety, stress, fear, and academic performance. Next, we move on to findings. As I've stated previously, these are the 5 main themes, and let me break down each one for you. The first main theme is depression. On the left side, you can see those are the sub-themes. And if you can see in the box for the contributing factors, we have bolded and highlighted age, level of education, and intern-nursing students. The reason is because this has been found as the most common factors across all 5 main themes, which you will be seeing in repetition. So for contributing factors, in terms of age, there's a positive correlation with the depression levels. An increase in BMI has led to high levels of depression in nursing students. In terms of level of education, final year nursing students were found to be more depressed in comparison to the other years. In terms of intern nursing students in clinical rotations, they have reported higher depression levels. This could be due to the stress that the pandemic has brought upon them. In terms of depressive symptoms, emotional eating behaviors and external eating behaviors are certain examples. Let me explain what emotional eating behavior is. It's basically more or less characterized by negative emotions. So for example, if the student feels depressed, they either tend to eat more or less. Similarly to external eating behaviors, which is triggered by external stimuli such as smell. Maybe if they smell food, they become nauseated or they crave more food than usual. My next sub-theme is severity of depression. According to Kalkin et al., 34.8% of the total number of participants had moderate to severe depression levels. According to Dio et al., 78% of their respondents recorded average levels of depression, 12% recorded mild levels of depression, and 10% recorded moderate levels of depression. The next main theme is anxiety. The sub-theme is contributing factors. Other than ones bolded in red, are eating behaviors such as I've said before, emotional, external, even restrictive eating behaviors. Restrictive eating behaviors are basically foods that the student is normally restricted from or normally don't eat, but then they tend to gravitate to it. Other than that is online learning, financial status, maybe the parents being unemployed due to the pandemic. Rural areas may increase the anxiety levels among nursing students due to the fact that they will not be able to access all the latest information about the pandemic or the virus as much as the ones living in urban areas. Extended lockdown periods, students knowing of someone who's been infected with the virus, or if they have parents or relatives that have been classified under the high-risk category. My next sub-theme is symptoms of anxiety. Some of the examples are hostility, interpersonal sensitivity, anxiousness, worry, distress, fear, uncertainty, helplessness, restrictive emotional or external eating behaviors. My next sub-theme is severity of anxiety. According to Kalkin et al., 23.9% of the respondents had moderate to severe anxiety. According to Savitsky et al., 42.8% had moderate levels of anxiety, whereas 13.1% had severe anxiety levels. According to Surgut et al., 94.4% of their respondents recorded low levels of anxiety, 4.5% recorded moderate levels of anxiety, and 1% recorded high levels of anxiety. According to Dio et al., 72% of their respondents recorded an average level of anxiety, 14% recorded mild levels, 10% recorded moderate levels, 3% recorded severe levels of anxiety, and 1% recorded extremely severe levels of anxiety. My third main theme is fear. The contributing factors, other than the ones highlighted in red, are frontliners or auxiliary nurses, final year students who are uncertain about their professional future and the probability of them getting infected with COVID-19, having family members under the high risk category, providing care for a suspected or positive patient, having peers who've been infected, quarantined, or even succumbed to the deadly virus. Other contributing factors include an increase in workload and a shortage of personal protective equipment in the hospitals, watching critical patients suffer and ultimately face death in the hospitals, a level of distress from social isolation and a moral standpoint resulting from experiencing death to a huge extent around them. Other than that, upsetting news in regards to COVID-19. My fourth main theme is stress. For contributing factors, eating behaviors such as emotional, external, or restrictive eating behaviors, poor psychological well-being, even if it's either like prior to the pandemic or during the pandemic, students who identify themselves as non-heterosexual because they feel that they may not be able to relate to the other students who identify themselves as heterosexual, or they could, their family members could not even be aware that they identify themselves as heterosexual, and that could, non-heterosexual, and that could increase their levels of stress, an extended lockdown period, and social isolation. And students that have been living with or without family members both recorded high levels of stress. Any nursing students were not aware of any positive cases around their area, or the probability of getting infected with COVID-19 themselves. Other contributing factors include inadequate hands-on skills due to the cessation of clinical training, staffing shortages, and longer working hours in the hospitals that would force the students to compensate for that in the hospitals during their internship. Nursing students who categorize under first-degree obese individuals because they resort to eating behaviors due to these stress levels. Family members who are again in the high-risk category, providing care for suspected or positive patient in the hospitals, having peers who've been infected, quarantined, or succumbed to the deadly virus, and added expenditure on mobile internet data to be used for online learning, a lack of physical activity in confinement, and a lack of practice about infectious diseases in universities and the know-how. My next sub-theme is symptoms, which include anger, anxiety, helplessness, uncertainty, distress, and sadness. According to Kalkin et al., 32.1% of the respondents had moderate to severe symptoms of stress. Aslan and Pekins recorded that their respondents had moderate stress levels. According to Begum and Devi, however, 13% of their respondents had low symptoms of stress, 83% had moderate symptoms of stress, and 4% of the respondents had high symptoms of stress. My last main theme is academic performance, and the sub-theme is contributing factors, other than the ones highlighted in red, are feelings of anxiousness and distress due to the pandemic, students feeling isolated, otherwise known as social isolation, exhaustion on an interpersonal level, as in a relationship or communication between people, an increase in the depression and anxiety levels, especially in students pursuing the medical and nursing field. Other contributing factors include the outbreak itself, students living in rural areas, those who have professional responsibilities or responsibilities towards their family members or relatives, restricted access to electronic infrastructure and a lack of internet access, especially in the rural areas. Institutional framework of nursing education has been altered, causing the students to struggle with adapting to the new institutional framework, a lack of clinical training or experience, and the commencement of virtual clinicals. So these will lead to inadequate hands-on skills. Now moving on to my discussion, in my opinion, future researchers should conduct studies focusing on the relationship between nursing students and depressions. Based on the research that I've done, the critical literature review that I've done, there were not that many researches done on depression. More of it has been focused on anxiety and stress levels. Next, the nursing faculty should be involved in the research to gain a concise and in-depth perspective of nursing students and their psychological well-being during the pandemic. Universities should establish a helpline or online counseling sessions for students struggling with their mental health. It's really important, especially during this pandemic, to destigmatize mental health issues and provide them with the necessary support. Additional support should be provided to nursing students to ease navigation through the changes in the curriculum and their career outlook, especially for the final year students who are about to start their professional life. As a conclusion, it has already been proven that nursing students had to endure psychological impacts due to the COVID-19 pandemic and all the changes it brought about, from online learning to the suspension of clinical training, delayed graduation, being commissioned as auxiliary nurses in hospitals, inadequate practical skills, isolation, exacerbation of their current mental health problems, and the list goes on. A better understanding of the effects and the extent of it on nursing students will lead to effective solutions that will improve the current situation of the students, especially their psychological well-being, as they are indefinitely the future of the healthcare industry globally. As for my acknowledgements, I would like to thank my Dean, Dr. Pooja Yusuf from School of Nursing, for giving me the opportunity to showcase my capabilities and representing not only my university, but also our parent company, KPJ Healthcare Berhad Group, on an international platform such as this. I would also like to thank my lecturer, Dr. Anima Kunju, who's a senior lecturer and research and development coordinator, for all the guidance and support throughout the entire process update. These are my references. Thank you.
We expect the attendees who want to ask questions or make contributions to write us from the YouTube chat section. It was asked for you, dear sir. Are you considering taking initiatives to change the anti-vaccine tests as you return to clinical training at your school?
Yes, definitely. I would definitely try to take any initiative possible to change the anti-vaccine mindset, especially that in this pandemic, it is really, really important for all of us to be vaccinated in order to curb this panic and to prevent further mortality rates. So if there's anything that I would be able to do from my part once I return back to clinical training at my school, maybe have campaigns or print out pamphlets, have motivational talks about it, invite any professional related to vaccination to further educate the public as well as the students about the importance of vaccination, especially during this pandemic.
Thank you, your answers. I thank
Thank
everyone who asked questions and made contributions. Thank you to dear Tanya Kishore for your contribution.
Thank you and good evening.
Now I invite dear Feride Saruhan Akgün, joining us from Maltepe University, Turkey. She will talk about the literature review on the effect of COVID-19 outbreak on nurses, psychological stress and burnout. Now I am calling upon you to speak. Can you start, please?
Hello, Feride starts.
Elif. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. I'm Feride Saruhan Akgün. I have been working in a COVID-19 vaccination polyclinic as a nursing supervisor for last 6 months. At the same time, I'm studying as a graduate student in surgical nursing at Maltepe University. Last year, I had worked in both COVID intensive care unit and service. It was very challenging. That is why me and my friend Elif want to talk about stress and burnout during pandemic. Thanks for your attention. Introduction. COVID-19 and healthcare workers. The novel coronavirus disease COVID-19 is a disease that occurs first in Wuhan city at the end of December 2019, beginning from Chinese Hubei province. COVID-19 spread worldwide and seriously threatens human health. Along with the COVID-19 outbreak, healthcare professionals assumed critical responsibilities for patient care, treatment, and the prevention and control of the spread. Aim of the study. This study aimed to review the current literature on stress, depression, and burnout of nurses at the forefront of the pandemic who have to stay away from families while fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. It reminds and emphasizes that the situation will severely negatively impact the quality of health services. Methodology, a wide literature review on Medline, Board of Science, PubMed, Google Scholar, Elsevier, Science Direct, Keyword, COVID-19, nurse, stress, burnout. Definitions. Stress, a mood that causes anxiety or increases in tension in a person, both in a psychological and physical sense. It is shown in various studies as the disease of old age. Burnout is defined as to fail, wear out, or become exhausted by making excessive demands on energy, strength, or resources. A progressive and chronic stress state can be expressed as burnout. The psychological stress during pandemic. Infectious disease outbreaks negatively impact the general population, especially healthcare providers. The media spotlights the increasing number of confirmed and suspected cases. Also, there was increased workload in the health system, depletion of personal protective equipment, lack of certain medication, and inadequate mental support causes psychological stress. It often contributes to depression and burnout for nurses all over the world. The psychological stress during pandemic. Healthcare professionals at the forefront of the pandemic forecast for COVID-19 patients provide the necessary healthcare under demanding conditions during long working hours. It has been reported that during the pandemic, levels of stress and fear in nurses increased over time. Nurses experience burnout due to uncertainty and an intense workload, and often show up with insomnia and depressive symptoms. More and more psychological stress among nurses during pandemic. The increased risk of transmission resulting from prolonged and close contact with COVID-19 patients contributes to psychological stress. Psychological stress is more common in nurses than the others who have difficulty adjusting to this busy pace or lack of experience in providing nurses care in COVID-19 wards of intensive care units. During this period, the pressure of responsibilities towards the family conflicts with the sense of duty towards patients increases emotional stress. It often causes burnout. Studies conducted on healthcare professionals dealing with COVID-19 patients, symptoms of anxiety, depression, insomnia, PTSD, and restlessness have been reported due to increased psychological stress. Nurses a risky group about burnout. The inability to cope with stress and fatigue constitutes the basis of burnout. In this manner, burnout is thought to result from chronic stress. Burnout is common, especially in occupational groups that provide service and care to people. It is known that healthcare professionals constitute one of the riskiest groups in this sense. Common non-pandemic reasons that contribute burnout. In our country, within the nursing profession, because the job description is not understandable, nurses mostly could not get a chance to do their job under the report. Nurses with different educational levels could be evaluated for the same job title, ignoring the qualification. Along with that, they mostly have to do their profession for low wages and long working hours. All of the above negatively affect both personal and business life with nurses' mental and physical health. As a result, it increases the susceptibility to burnout. Thank you. Burnout importance patient care. Burnout has significant negative consequences in an individual and institutional sense. Burnout can be experienced as a workplace phenomenon that negatively affects both the healthcare provider and then the patient care. Minimizing burnout is crucial in ensuring effective patient care. Burnout during pandemic.
Thank you, Feride.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Elif Balkan. Thank you, participation. I am studying in graduate student in surgical nursing at Malta University. During the pandemic, I was both a student and nurse. I am a supervisor nurse at Bursa City Hospital. We discussed exhausted nurses working under difficult working conditions. According to literature we have scanned, I will talk about burnout, consequences, recommendations during the pandemic. Burnout during the pandemic, healthcare professionals working with the coronavirus worked hard in this process and very tired. The rapid increase in the number of cases during the illness has caused severe problems in medical institutions, and various difficulties have been experienced, such as the need for medical equipment and medical personnel, with the increase in the monthly working hours of the nurse due to the infection. More nurses were needed in the field. Health workers expend physical, emotional, and mental energy for patient care and treatment. Nurse and constantly faced with stressful situations that cause emotional exhaustion when managing complex care or treatment process. COVID-19 outbreak raises burnout risk as it creates a crisis in the health system. In environments where stress and uncertainty are high, especially during the COVID-19 outbreak, long-term and increased workload have been shown to cause burnout syndrome in nurses occur a shorter period. During the period of the COVID-19 outbreak, very few studies were conducted on burnout levels among health professionals. For health workers, the stress of caring for COVID-19 patient can affect employees' physical and mental health, reduce their ability to work, and even lead to a lack of clinical competence. Urgent interventions are required to increase employees' physical and psychological endurance and strengthen healthcare system. To cope with burnout, it is necessary to limit nurses' shift hours, provide rest areas, provide explanatory detailed rules for the prevention and protective equipment, and create opportunities in open communication with management for a healthcare professional to express their feeling. In addition, nurses who care for COVID-19 patients should be provided with psychological support, be specially trained psychologists. In this manner, it can reduce anxiety and problems caused by the inability to control situation associated with the disease. Thank you very much. Our presentation over.
We expect the attendees who want to ask questions or make contributions to write us from the YouTube chat section. Now I invite dear Alvalet Agahya, joining us from Oman. We will talk about learning patient care away from the patient. Now I'm calling upon you to speak.
Is it clear? And my voice clear? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Al-Walid Khalid Al-Lihyai. I'm from Oman College of Health and Science from Sultanate of Oman. Today I'm going to talk about learning patient care away from the patient, a case from Oman. I'm going to go through these outlines: background, introduction, challenge, opportunities, and finally with take-home messages. The introduction: the case of distance learning and nursing education in Oman. The case of online or distant education in Oman is totally a new experience. The college and other higher institute had very little experience in teaching online, since it was not approved as a method of education. But since the pandemic, higher institutions were forced to move from traditional method of education to online format to comply with the social distance regulation. Nursing education was greatly affected because not only the theory classes were moved online, but also the clinical practice sessions were recorded, and the clinical practice were suspended by the college. In the light of these events, the following are three main themes that emerge from the analysis of this situation, which is that infrastructures and technology, motivation and discipline, learning how to care. Let's start from the background. As we know, COVID-19 is a global pandemic that is life-threatening, but we as a future nursing, we have to cope with it. COVID-19 first reported case was from Wuhan, China, on 31 December 2019, and it was approved as a global pandemic on 11 March 2020. The character of nursing important. Why it's important? Because it's the thing that makes us different from each nurse and others. So as Carolyn Jarvis said, the character of nurse is just as important as the knowledge he or she possesses. So learning from the experience of caring for patients have to be direct contact with the patient that we cannot have a chance to do it because our clinical was suspended. So nursing students' experience of online learning lead to stressful and lead to low certification and lead to poor academic performance among nursing students, and also reduce student social interactions, leading slower learning process and less motivation. And the final quote is, students often get lost in the chaos of the pandemic, which lead to practical worries, fewer learnings, opportunities, doubt about their choice to become a nurses. Let's move to our first challenge, which is infrastructures and technology. The first point is regulation. Online was not approved as a method for bachelor degree. It was only for master's and PhD. So since it's our first pandemic, we have to deal with, lockdown, we have to deal with online. Availability of hardware. Many students cannot afford to buy laptops and PC and etc. or specifically place to study. So they have to use their phone. So that causes a delay in catching up with the lessons. Network, especially geography. Geography was a problem for many students because they live away from towns or from college location, so it was hard for them. Experience of teaching and learning online. because it's our first lockdown and online experience teaching. Many teachers and students found it difficult to learn online. And final point is IT skills and IT support. Let's move to another challenge, which is motivation and discipline. The lockdown experience caused a lot of anxiety and depression for many students, which may reduce their performance or academic performance. Our most problem or challenge was time management, because we have to divide our time between our daily activities and between our studies. Another point is dependency and responsibility. In the past, we used to depend on the teacher to explain to us and asking them questions, but now we have the all responsible to search and find our answers and rewatch the recorded lectures. The final point is communication between the faculty and the students. It was very difficult because some students were not liking the online learning, and some of them were living far away from their faculty, so that causes limited engagement and participation. Our final challenge was learning how to care. Caring is the fundamental of nursing. Nurse-patient cares take place in daily practice, which we cannot find it because of the suspended of the clinical. Another point is complexity of learning situation. We got our knowledge from the theory part, and we got our skills from the recorded lab procedures and videos, but we was not sure that we have the caring behavior to care a patient with direct contact, because we are not able to enter the clinical side. So in this case, many teachers try their best to get their clinical experience into the classroom by let us imagine how to deal with a current situation and how to talk with current situations also with patients. So they play a big role modeling in faculty caring and compassion attitude, and they try their best to communicate with the student and explain whatever they want or whatever they didn't understand. So COVID not only brings challenge, but also brings opportunities for us as students to learn new study skills, and which is online learning and learning styles, which is a study from online books or from online magazines. We learned time management skill. We was able to divide our time between our daily activities and our studies. We also enhance autonomy and confidence, enhance collaborative environment between students and school. That's lead more and more research needed to explore effective ways to teaching caring to the student. Now I'm going to end up with take-home messages. A caring and supportive learning environment leads to enhanced students' caring behavior, which enhance their potential success in nursing career. Now I'm ending up with Art William Curtis, that's saying, I'm not telling you it's going to be easy, I'm telling you it's going to be worth it. These are the references that I use in my presentation. And thank you, I hope you are enjoying.
We expect attendees who want to ask questions or make contributions to write us from the YouTube chat section. Thank you to dear Alvarez Alyahya for your contribution.
You're welcome.
Now I invite dear Burhan Telli, joining us from Turkey. He will talk about the vocation etudes of nurses. Now I'm calling upon him to speak.
Can you see?
Yes, I can.
Hello, I am Burhan Talle. I am a fourth grade student at Malta University School of Nursing. I will vaccination attitudes of nurses during pandemic process impact on the fear of COVID-19. Presentation plan. Introduction, materials and methods, results, conclusion. Nurses who are in direct contact with patients during the pandemic process are among the most risky group among healthcare professionals. For this reason, nurses are afraid of getting COVID-19 infection and infecting their relatives while providing care to their patients. It is extremely important that vaccination begins and priority is given to healthcare workers, especially nurses. Purpose of the research. The purpose of this study is to determine the effect of nurses' vaccination attitudes on fear of COVID-19 during the pandemic process. Materials and methods. This research is a prospective descriptive study. No sample selection was made in study, and 158 nurses working in two pre-hospitals were studied in March 2021. An introductory information form prepared by the research in line with the literature, attitudes toward COVID-19 vaccine scale, COVID-19 fear scale was applied. Ethics Committee approval of the study and written consent of the nurses participating in the study were obtained. In the analysis of the data, besides descriptive statistics, Mann-Whitney U test was used for comparisons. The results were evaluated at 95% confidence interval and p less than 0.05 significance level. Table 1. Distribution of chart by demographics. It was determined that 89.3% of the nurses participating in the study were women, 56% were between the ages for 20-30, and 83.6% did not have a chronic disease. Table 2. Distribution of participant opinions on fear of COVID-19. Results. In the COVID-19 fear scale, it was determined that 41.1% of the nurses answered, I agree to the item, I am afraid of losing their life due to coronavirus. Table 3. Participant attitudes towards COVID-19 vaccine. Results. In the attitudes towards COVID-19 vaccine scale, it was determined that 77.2% of the nurses wanted to be vaccinated. Conclusion. In our study, it was observed that the nurses' attitudes towards vaccination were positive for themselves and their relatives. It was determined that they were afraid of getting sick and dying due to COVID-19. We believe that the vaccination of healthcare personnel, especially nurses who interact the most with the patients during the COVID-19 process, is extremely important in order to prevent healthcare service from interrupting and preventing losses. Thank you.
We expect the attendees who want to ask questions or make contributions to write us from the YouTube section. Thank you to dear Burhan Tali for your contribution. By the way, I'm sorry if it was a mistake. So finally, I invite our academic coordinator, dear Assistant Professor Demet Avcı Alpar, to make a concrete closing speech. Now I'm calling upon him to speak.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Congress Committee, we would like to thank Mr. Hüseyin Şahin, dear founder of Maltepe University. We want to thank Professor Şahin Karasar, Director of Maltepe University, for creating this opportunity. We want to thank Professor Betül Çotuk-Söken, Vice Rector of Maltepe University and General Coordinator of our Congress. We want to thank Professor Hacer Karanisoğlu, our School of Nursing Director and Congress Academic Coordinator. We want to thank Associate Professor Memnun Sevent and Assist Professor Oya Gümüşkaya Bradley for broadening our vision with their informative keynote speeches. We want to thank dear Gizem Şabanoğlu for performing a funny and exciting laughter yoga activity. We want to thank the Scientific Committee and Advisory Board members of the Congress for their priceless contributions. Moreover, we would like to thank the Student Executive Committee and Student Organization Committee members of the Congress for their tremendous contributions and sleepless nights. We would also like to thank Mr. Gökhan Menekşe, our Press and Public Relations Department Officer of Maltepe University, for his extraordinary efforts in the background of our Congress. We are delighted that the participants are interested in our Congress. 75 guests from 16 countries have participated in our traditional Congress that we held online for the first time due to the pandemic this year. 28 participants attended the nursing sessions and 10 oral presentations were presented successfully on the Covid-19 and health subject today. We want to thank the respected participants for their contributions to the Maltepe University International Student Congress. We hope to meet you face-to-face in our next meetings as before. See you all next time. Thank you.
This is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.